Hello friends, welcome again to another coding tutorial with me, Michael Tobechuku. Today we'll be learning a little bit of Python programming. It's a simple project we have in front of us today. We'll be creating a numbers guessing game project using Python. This is a pretty interesting project that we can do on Python that can help us learn some basic concepts in Python programming. As we go on, I'd like you to code along with me. And if you encounter any errors, go over your code again, compare it to what I have on the screen, as you can see, and be sure you debug and fix all your errors as we go. Are you ready? Oh, I can hear you. Are you ready? So this is the finished project. So I'm just going to run it and then you see what happens. So I will run my code. So our app says, hello there, let's play a game. I will pick a random number between 1 and 99. You can make it any range of numbers. And you will have to guess the number I picked, right? So say ready, type Y to begin. So I'm going to type Y and press enter on my keyboard. And it says I have picked a number between 1 and 99. Enter your first guess. So I'm going to enter my first guess, let's say 50. So it says your guess is high, which means the number I have guessed is higher than the number the app picked. So I'm going to go a lower number, say 35. Oh, it still says my guess is high again. So I'm going to pick lower number still, so 20. Oh, my guess is still high, so I'm going to do 12. Wow, my guess is still high. So let's say 6. Now my guess is low, which means the number the app picked is between 6 and 12. Since 12 is high and 6 is low, so I'm going to do 8. It says my guess is low, so I'm going to go higher a little, 9. My guess is low still, so I'm going to do 11. My guess is high, so that means the number must be 10, right? Since 9 is low and 11 is high, it means it has to be 10. Yay, I got it. So you guessed right. The number I picked was 10. This is a pretty interesting project, right? So the first thing we'll do in this project is to import the random module in Python. So I'll write comments. Of course, we write comments using the hash symbol. So every line that starts with the hash symbol means it's a comment. And a comment is not really part of the code. It's just an explanation of the code to help you understand what is going on, okay? So import random module. So to do that, you just type the keyword import and random. That's it. So that's the first thing we do to import the random module to help the application to be able to generate a random number, a random guess, okay? Right. Now, the next thing we do is to create the variable that will store the number that the app picked, okay? Don't forget, the app is supposed to pick a number, a random number, and we have to guess it. So we create a variable. So we say create a variable to store the random number the app picked. Again, this is a comment starting with what? The hash symbol. So we can call our random number, we can call that variable anything we want. So we're not going to use something simple. So we'll call it random number equals to random dot rand int. Then in this bracket, we'll now put the range of numbers that we want our app to guess. Okay, put the range. If you want it to guess between 1 and 99, it means you do 1 comma 99. Okay, if I want it to guess between 1 and 20, I put 1 comma 20. If I want to 1 to 50, so the range of numbers is what you put here in the bracket. Is that taken? So I'm just going to use 150. So this is the line of code from here all the way to the end here. This is what generates the random number. Okay, this is what makes the app to be able to generate a random number. Okay, now the next thing our app did, the first thing rather that the app did, is to welcome us with a simple message. So how do we do that? Now let's write a comment. So say welcome the user with a simple message explaining the game. That makes sense, right? Don't forget again, this is a comment. So to do that, we use the print function. So we say print we say, hello there, let's play a game, right? So we write another print function. So we say, I will pick a random number and you have to guess the number I picked, right? That's simply it. Okay, that's simply what it is. So let's run this code and then let's see what happens. But of course, you have to save your project. So I'm just going to save it as a random number game. Okay, so I've saved my project as random number game. You can give it any name that you like, but still helping you to know what project it is. So I'm going to run this. Come here, click run and click run module. You can also click F5 as a shortcut. So I'll run it. So let me close this shell. So I'm going to run this project. I'm going to run so far to see what happens, okay? So what we expect is to see this message and also see this message, right? So let's click run here. As you can see, you can also click F5 as a shortcut. So I'm going to click run module. So you see it says, hello there, let's play a game. I will pick a random number and you have to guess the number I picked. See that? All right, so close the Python shell. All right, now let's move on. So now we're going to, let me also write a comment to help you. Now create an input for. Now, the next thing we'll do is to ask the user if he or she is ready to begin, right? And then we'll allow the user to be able to type a letter, say Y, for the user to begin the app, okay? So let me write a comment to say, use the input function to ask the user if they are ready to begin, right? Now, so we'll then say input. So we'll now put something in the input, say ready to begin, type Y to start. It can be any letter for you. It can be A to start. It can be R, okay? But it should be a letter. Now, to make this easy, we're going to store this input function in a variable. So I'll create a variable and I'll call this variable start game, and then which means whatever the user types after this question is asked will be stored in a variable called what? Start game. Okay, simple as that. So whatever the user types will be stored in a variable. That way it allows us to be able to use it later on. And because I want it to skip to the next line, I'll just use /n, but you don't have to worry about that. So let's run this now and see what happens, okay? So it says, hello there, let's play a game. I'll pick a random number and you have to guess the number I picked. Ready to begin, type Y to start. So the user is expected to type Y here, okay? And hit enter, and then the game begins. That's the next thing we will do now. All right, so that is that. So the next thing is we want our app to check what the user types as a response to this. Don't forget that the input function allows the user to be able to input something, okay, on the computer using the keyboard. That's simply what the input function does. So now we will say if we use an if statement, if start game, that is, if whatever the user types here is Y is a string, of course, because it's a letter. If Y is what? If start game, rather, if start game is Y. So what should happen? Now we should now ask the user to begin to enter their guess, because at this point the game can start, okay? Because if the user types Y, it means they are ready to begin. Make sense? So ready to begin, type Y to start. So if the user types Y, what should happen? We'll now create another variable called the user's guess. Then we'll now use the input function to ask the user to type in their first number, their first guess. Okay, so we say enter your first guess, then add a little bit of space. So enter your first guess. Okay, so now let's run this and see what happens. So of course it says ready to begin, type Y to start. I press Y on the keyboard and I press enter. So you see the next thing it says is what? Enter your first guess. So here our app will say I have picked a random number. Guess the number, right? So if I run this, you see our app says what? Ready to begin, type Y to start. I press Y on the keyboard and I press enter. So it says I have a random number. Guess the number. So it should be I have picked a random number. Guess the number. So let's run this. So I have picked a random number. Guess the number. So let's run this and see. So it says type Y to start. So I press Y on the keyboard and I press enter. So it says I have picked a random number, guess the number. So here is where the user is expected to type a number. So let's close the idle shell and come back to our code. Now, if we leave this line of code like this, we're going to have an error, okay? So we need to convert whatever the user types here into a number. And we have two different data types of numbers in Python. We have float, which is a decimal number, and integer, which is a whole number like 5, like 10, like 500, like 5,000. But floats or floating point number is a decimal number such as 2.5, such as 10.1, such as 5.2. Okay, so we want this whole number to become an integer. So what do? We come here to the beginning. So I'll put int, which is short for integer. Then I put a bracket here, and then at the end I put another bracket. So why do we have two brackets at the end? This first bracket is for this beginning of the bracket, while this is for the integer we just added, right? Makes sense. So this way the app will know that what the user is typing, right, as a response to guess the number is actually a number. Makes sense, right? All right, very good. Now let's move on to the next line. So the next thing, if you remember the finished code, the finished work, the next thing the app does is to tell you if your number is higher than the guess, or higher than the random number it picked, or lower than it. So then we say if user guess, right? If the user's guess, let's start with higher, okay? If the user's guess is higher, because that's the greater than symbol. If the user's guess, that the user guess variable, is higher than random number, can you remember where we got this random number from? This variable up here. And remember I said that this variable stores the number that the app picked, okay? So we say if the user guess is greater than a random number, then we now print a message. We say your guess is higher. Okay, we say your guess is higher. Okay, then also let's do for the lower immediately. We'll say elif, which is else if user guess, if it is lower than the random number, right? So what should we do? We should then print a message. We should say your guess is lower. So that gives you a clue as to whether you should increase the number or what? Reduce it. Makes sense, right? So then we need another if statement if the user gets it correctly. So we say if user guess, if it is exactly equal to random number, then what should happen? Of course, we should say excellent, you guessed it Right. All right. But we're not done. But this is just to give you an idea of what we are trying to create. Okay. As we go on, we'll still need to modify this code, because if we leave it like this, the application will only run once. Okay, the application will only run once. We need to use what is known as a while loop to keep it running. Okay, and that will be the next thing we'll do. But first of all, let us run this and see where we are at. So let us run the code now. So of course it says type Y to start. So I'll type Y on the keyboard, hit enter. Then it says I have picked a random number, guess the number. So I'm just going to guess 50. So it says my guess is what? Higher. But now you see that the game runs only once and stops. And that is because we have not used what is known as a while loop, which will be the next thing we are going to do now. Now, we need to use a while loop to keep the game running until the user guesses correctly. If you remember the finished work, it allowed me to keep guessing and guessing and guessing and giving me hints until I got it correctly, which is when the game stops. So come here before you have this if user guess greater than random number. So I'll write a comment here to guide us. So we'll say, ensure your comment goes to the beginning of that line, because this while loop is not part of this if, because the while loop is not under this if statement right here. Okay, the reason this user guess is indented this way, has a bit of space, is because this user guess is part of this if statement. Okay, but the while loop we're writing now is not part of this if statement. Okay, so ensure that it starts from the edge of the line. So here we'll write a while loop. We'll say while. Now, what is a while loop? So a while loop is a loop is a repetition. Okay, so what we're trying to say here is keep doing something until something happens. Okay, so for example, let me give you a basic example. While it is not raining, do not use an umbrella. What that means is that once it starts raining, you have to use an umbrella. Okay, so we're going to say while the random number. What is the random number? Do you still remember? Yeah, if you scroll up, you see the random number is the number generated by our application. Okay, so say while the random number is not equals to the user guess. Okay, now in Python, the exclamation mark and equals to means not equals to. Okay, not equals to, while the double equal to, right, means is or equal to. That's what it means. So this right here is direct opposite of this. All right, good. I'm sure you got that. So we say while the random number is not equal to user guess, which means as long as the user is guessing and guessing a wrong number, what should happen? Then we now put our colon in front here. That's when all of these statements now come in. We now say while the random number is not equal to the user guess, don't forget to put the user guess in quotation marks. Okay, while it is not equal to it, then to now check if the user guess is greater than the random number, print what? Your guess is higher. But that's not all. We also need to repeat this line of code here that says user guess input, all of this. And why are we repeating it? So it allows the user to type again. So it allows the user to do what? Type again. So I'm going to repeat that down here. I don't need to repeat it here because at this point it is taken, of course, that the person has got the correct number. Okay, so we say if the user guess is greater than the random number, tell the user, print that your guess is higher. Then you need to put this input function so the user can what? Guess again. Then in case it is also lower, say your guess is lower, then use this input function so that why? So the user can do what? Guess again. Now save it and let's run it and see. So of course, is it ready to begin? Type Y to start Y and enter on my keyboard. So it said I have picked a random number, guess the number. I'll guess 35. Your guess is higher, which means I need to go for a lower number. So I'm going to guess 24. It says my guess is higher still. So I'm going to pick a lower number still, 10. So now it says my guess is lower. So I have to pick a higher number. I have to pick a higher number. So that means it's between 10 and 24. So let's say 15. So it says my guess is what? Higher. So I have to pick a lower number. So it says my guess is higher. So I have to pick a lower number between 10 and 15. So let's try 13. It's still higher. So let's say 12. Woo! You guessed right. But I want you to observe something. It tells me you guessed right and it keeps repeating it. Now, this can actually crash your computer. So to ensure that does not happen, you don't keep having that infinity loop. Before you run your code at this point, you need to add a simple break. Okay, so I'm going to put a comment here to guide you. So we say use a break to prevent an infinity loop. Okay, so you use this break, the break keyword to end the project. So that ends the project properly. Now let's run it again. So it says type Y to start, of course, Y, and I press enter on the keyboard. So I'm going to guess 34. Since my guess is higher, so 12. My guess is lower, so I'm going to guess 15. Yay, I guessed right. Wow, on my third try. So I wanted to give this a try, and I'm sure you'll have fun creating this project. Okay, so I'll see you in another tutorial. My name again remains Michael Tobechukwu. Bye.